Hi, welcome back to my channel. This is my July reading wrap-up. For some reason, in July, I went super heavy on audiobooks. I read 8 books in July, and 6 of those were on audio, even though 2 of those 6 are books that I also had a physical copy of. I think the reason why that happened is because one of the books that I read, it just took me a lot longer to get through it because it was sort of a thick book and I was taking my time. I'm going to start with the 2 physical books that I read, and then I'll move on to the audiobooks. One reason why I did only get through 2 books, physical books this month, was because I did take a trip to Ecuador. I would love to share about that with you and show you some pictures. So if you're interested, I'll have a little bit at the end of this video after the outro explaining about my time in Ecuador. The first book that I read, physically read, was Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians by Brandon Sanderson. I really wanted to read this book because I've been reading Brandon Sanderson. I got into him this month. And this is a middle grade book, so I wanted to read it and see if I thought it would be an appropriate read aloud for my class. And although I would definitely recommend this book to my students and recommend this book to you, and I do plan on reading the rest of the books in the series, as a read aloud, I feel like there's too much jumping back and forth by the narrator. So he's telling a story of something that happened to him, but then he'll stop and basically explain to you why he's writing the way that he's writing and why he's using the words that he's using. So I just think that as a read aloud, that may be a little bit confusing to students, but I definitely recommend this book, and I will be checking out the rest of the books in the series. The other book that I physically read this month was also by Brandon Sanderson. It's The Well of Ascension, which is the second book in the Mistborn series. This book is almost 800 pages, 700 and something. There's a lot of politics in this book, and so I wanted to take my time with it, read it a little bit slower, really digest, think about, enjoy the stuff that I was reading in this book. And so it did take me a little bit longer to read this book than normal, which is why I only read 2 physical books and the rest of the books were audio. I do give this 4.5 stars. There was just a lot of politics in this book compared to the first one, and why that's fine. I do like politics in books. There was just some parts where it got a little bit slow, especially at the beginning. As a whole, the series so far is a 5-star series. I still have 1 more to read. This book, though, I did give 4.5 stars. So let's get into the audiobooks. 2 of the audiobooks that I listened to, I do have physical copies of as well. So the first one was Daughter of the Pirate King. I've had this one on my shelf for quite a while, and I finally was able to get it from the library, so I did listen to it on audio. I was not as impressed with this book as I thought I was going to be. I definitely didn't hate it. I think I gave it 3.5 stars. It kept my attention. I was really interested to see what was going to happen next. I just don't think that it was enough for me to want to check out the next book. So this, unfortunately, is probably one that I will be unhauling fairly soon. And the next audiobook that I listened to that I also have a book of is Untamed by Glennon Doyle. So I've seen this book just around. I don't really know where I've seen it, but it was definitely a familiar book to me. And I saw this a few months ago at a thrift store for like 99 cents. So I picked it up. And again, this was one that I saw that was available now through the Libby app at my library. So I went and checked it out. I did not know that this was a nonfiction book. It is, I don't want to call it a self-help book, but there are pieces of it that sort of lean towards that. This is very heavily like girl power, and there are a lot of things that talk about parenting and different aspects of parenting and just like living your true self. But I would highly recommend this book to anybody. I would recommend it to a man, to a woman. I would recommend it to somebody who was a parent or not a parent. There's just so many good takeaways from this book. So this Glennon Doyle Untamed, I gave it 5 stars. And I don't normally do this, but I actually went back through, I don't know if you can see, and I highlighted, there you go. I highlighted a bunch of passages. So this is like the first book that I've annotated in quite a while. And I will keep this one on my shelf and reference it again and again. I may even make this a reread. I don't know. But I definitely think that you should check out Untamed by Glennon Doyle. Now let's move on to the books that I listen to on audio that I don't have physical copy of. The first one is romantic comedy, and it is a romantic comedy. This is the first romantic comedy that I've ever read that was not written by a woman, so I was a little interested to, see if there were some comparisons that I could draw, and there really wasn't. It was still a great book. I really couldn't tell that it was being written by a man. I did give this 3 stars though, because the couple, the main couple, they were just okay. Like, I didn't really feel connected to them. I really wasn't rooting for them necessarily. The most interesting thing about this book is the setting of this book mainly takes place on set of a like a Saturday Night Live type of show. And so there was a lot of descriptions and details about how like things that went on to get the show ready every week with the guest musician and the guest host and like writing the little skits and just all the little detail things that you don't know about how late the writers stay up, how often they're there, that they sleep in their office all the time. So that aspect of it was pretty interesting to me because I could make the comparisons. Although it wasn't Saturday Night Live, it was like called the Night Owls or something like that. It was interesting to me to see how something like Saturday Night Live is pulled off each week. But the rest of it was just okay. I didn't think it was a great book. I'm definitely glad that I haven't bought the book physically. And yeah, I probably wouldn't really recommend it. It was just okay. Okay, so the next book that I listened to was the 5th book in the, I don't really know what the series is called, but it, let's see, I have it over here. The first one is Crave, and then Crush, and then Covet, and then Court. So this is the 5th one, which is Charm. And the series as a whole, I really like. The first book is very cringy, like Twilight, but that's okay because I really like Twilight. But then as you progress in the series, the stakes do get higher. There is a lot of really interesting settings and things that they need to overcome. However, in the 5th book is almost like a flashback. So it takes something that happened in one of the earlier books that was never fleshed out and basically tells you what was happening during that time period. And while I can see that it's very interesting to the series as a whole, and especially to the next book, which I think that book's called Cherish, the last one that just came out. So I definitely understand its place in the series. But one of the main settings was almost, it reminded me of Sesame Street. It was like a town or, a city, a world, because it wasn't on Earth, where everything was purple. Like everything they ate was purple, and everybody's skin and hair and clothes, everything was purple. And it was just very odd. I felt like it was just a fluff book. There really wasn't any moments where I was gripping the edge of my seat. Towards the end, it did get a little bit better. So I don't know. I gave this book a 3.5 stars. The series is still a 5-star series for me, but this book was just a little odd. It was just a little different than the rest of the books. And I definitely do recommend the series, and I definitely will read the next book. One thing that I do want to say is if you have a Books A Million by you, these books are pretty chunky and they're not cheap. So I've gotten the first 4 of them, and I've only paid $7 each for them because every time I go to Books A Million, they have like an area in the back of the store that you can go look through their bargain books. And over time and checking back there over and over again, I have gotten the first 4 books there for only $7 a piece. So I'm hoping that the other 2, the last 2, I'll also be able to get from there. And I also read One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is the second, I think maybe this is the second book I've read by her. I have had this one on my list for a while and I just never bought it. went ahead and listened to it on audio, and it was amazing. So basically the general premise is this woman marries her high school sweetheart, and on their first anniversary, he goes missing. So fast forward a few years later, he's eventually declared dead. It was like a helicopter crash or something. And a few years later, she's in a relationship, she's engaged, and he calls her husband calls her, and he's alive. So she has to go back and forth between, like, do I go back to my husband? Do I stay with my fiance? And Taylor Jenkins Reid did a really good job at tearing your heart. And really, like, I had no idea. Throughout the whole book, I was like, oh, I think she needs to go and stay with her husband because they had such an amazing love story. But then, you know, I would learn some things that would happen with her fiance. And I was like, oh no, her fiance is amazing. I really hope she stays with her fiance. And it was just back and forth and back and forth. I won't tell you what I wanted to happen, and I won't tell you what happens or who she ends up with, but she ends up with the person who I ultimately wanted her to end up with. So I gave this book 5 stars, and I really, really love it. The last book that I listened to or read was 7 Days in June. This is another romance. I don't know, I was really romance heavy in July for some reason. But one of the things that I really, really liked about this story was it followed the plot line of so many other romances that I've read. I would not call this a romantic comedy by any means, but the circumstances were unlike any book that I've ever read. So I don't really want to give too much away. But basically the two main characters knew each other in high school. They spent 7 days together in high school, fell in love with each other, and had to part ways. Fast forward years in the future, they're both successful authors, and they meet back up unexpectedly, and come to find out they have both been writing about each other in their bestsellers. And it was not all rainbows and butterflies. There were some really hard topics such as drug abuse and just other sorts of familial abuse. So definitely check the trigger warnings before you read it. But I did give it, I don't think I gave it a 5 stars. I think I gave it a 4 stars just because while I really liked the plot and I really liked the uniqueness of it, again, it wasn't a book where I was like really connected to the characters. And so I did give it a 4 stars, but I would recommend it. As always, thank you so much for sticking around and listening to what I have to say. I would really appreciate your subscribes and your likes and your comments. At this stage in the game, any sort of interaction with my channel helps so much. So I'm not afraid to beg for your your support. But I just really want to say that I appreciate everything. Please follow me on my social medias, and if you're interested, stick around after the outro to hear a little bit more about Ecuador. So at the end of July, my daughter and I, she's 16, we took our very first trip out of the country. I'm 42, and this was my very first trip out of the country. And we went with our church to Ecuador. I'm a teacher, and I have taught in some aspect or another, whether it's like professionally teaching or just teaching through my church, pretty much since I was in high school. And so that's definitely where my heart is. And we had an opportunity to travel to Ecuador with 4 other women. So 6 women total went. We went to Ecuador with a ministry called Pate Ministries, if you're interested in looking them up. And we basically just went for 7 days and went from village to village and did Bible camps with the little kids in these villages. And we did songs with them, and we made crafts, and we had a story time, and we just played games and whatever. And we just kind of loved on these kids. Not to mention the fact that we got to see a lot of Ecuador. Excuse me. And so I'm going to show you a series of videos to close out this video. Actually, they're probably pictures, not videos. And most of them are going to be just of me and my daughter doing various things. If you have any questions about this mission or any other mission, or if you've ever been to Ecuador, or if you've ever been on a mission trip, I would love to talk to you. I would love to hear more about it. Alrighty, thank you so much.